Hi, it's Paul Baxendale, and welcome to my latest video. Now, the end of a year and the beginning of a new one is always a time for both reflection and for looking forwards. And I hope that in this message today, I'll do a little bit of both. It comes to you in the form of both an invitation and a challenge. Now, let me explain that. The final few months of 2024 for me brought with them many blessings, and with those blessings much contemplation and thought as to not simply my own life, but the lives of those around me, and even to those lives I did not know particularly well, but who had reached out to me as a result of unhappiness, despair, loneliness, frustration, and very much a sense of hard times. In the weeks of thinking that followed, I couldn't help but keep coming back to both a phrase and a book that had had an impact upon me many years ago, but one that I felt a sense of resonating with me as something that was happening now, that we were ourselves living through times which the author had so eloquently and thoroughly described in her research and also in the book. Now, the quotation was from the author G. Michael Hopf from a post-apocalyptic novel in which he summed up a cyclical nature of history. Now, that quotation may be one which you're very familiar with yourself. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. I think it's fair to say that Western society in general is experiencing hard times right now. And I would also go so far as to say that these hard times are the result of weak men. I must admit that I'm less persuaded by Jared Diamond's theories on the collapse of civilizations in his excellent book Collapse: How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. And as a historian very familiar with antiquity, I am much more inclined towards another thesis. The author of that thesis and book that had had such an impact on me when I first read it, and has increasingly done so each and every time I read it, is Camille Paglia's Sexual Personae, a book in which she describes and identifies through culture and through the arts the very same cyclical nature of history that Hopf created for his work of fiction. However, here was Camille Paglia describing the very same cyclical nature of the rise and fall of empires and civilizations, and making her case for them being related to the moral integrity and the strength of the ethics in the men, in particular in both the Greek and Roman empires, having risen and fallen, both in complete sync with the rise and fall of true masculinity. In other words, of strong men, as she saw through her exploration of both the culture and the artistic works of both the rising and the falling of those empires. I'll just give you one example of the artistic connection that she found whilst looking at the rise and fall of these great civilizations. In both the Greek and the Roman empires, she found that art, and in particular the sculptures of men during the rising of those empires, depicted what we would describe as overtly masculine features in the sculptures. Sharp lines, what she refers to as Apollonian, the mythological visionary masculine, features of muscular chests, arms, and etched abdominals, leaving no doubt in archaeologists' minds as to what they had uncovered when they found them. As both empires began to fall, Not coincidentally, she believes, the male sculptures began to take on a more feminine form. Softer lines, more feminine, more Dionysian, elemental mythological forms, to the extent that when unearthed by archaeologists, they often did not know whether the statue was that of a man or of a woman. Those of men were no longer what we would now know as traditionally masculine features and builds, but were instead builds and features of pubescent boys, with the feminine being dominant. It was something that the Stoics noted and warned against, sadly to too few ears. As Seneca wrote, "Men do not care how nobly they live, but only how long." Although it is in the reach of every man to live nobly, but within no man's reach to live long. And Marcus Aurelius, at the height of Rome's domain and power, noted, "Do not act as if you are going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." Society didn't listen, and so nature continued its natural cycle of decay and then destruction, once weakness had found its way into men's souls. Well, what has all that got to do with us and today? And if anything, what can we learn and take from it? Personally, looking at the photographs of those statues and their coinciding with the decline in both society's moralities and ethics, and then to their decline and eventual destruction, I believe we need to stop and take a moment to consider where we are at as a society, and for us all, but particularly for men, to self-reflect upon our morals, our values, and our physical and emotional psyches. Am I saying that all men today are more effeminate, weaker, and less moral? No, absolutely not. And neither am I saying that this is just this generation of weak men that has caused these hard times that we are today experiencing. And I will address something that somebody commented to me about, even talking about the issue of strong men and weak men. He appeared particularly personally upset with the mere discussion of the subject, saying that he felt that the concept of strong versus weak men was very subjective, as he also felt good versus bad was subjective, and also right versus wrong. I'm very thankful for his interest and his perspective, but in all honesty, after some serious thought, and I do believe that his perspective, as all of ours, deserves serious thought, I couldn't help but feel that as though if we as a society are unable to point out to our young men virtues that we can readily identify as belonging to strong men and those belonging to weak men, then we are failing our young men. I'm not saying that there isn't nuance with all subjects, but if you feel as though the discussion of the virtues associated with strong men, good behavior, and what is right and wrong cannot be had, then I think you are a problem, are a part of the problem in this society. If someone can persuade me that being honest, virtuous, holding yourself to your word, having integrity and courage and honor are not the virtues of a strong man, then I'll reassess my opinion. But until then, pushing it into the long grass as an unmentionable subject, not to be discussed for fear of upsetting someone, indicates exactly why our society is where it is today, in hard times. The changes within society in the last 100 years have both directly and indirectly decimated through 2 world wars, technological changes and cultural confusion that has resulted in what I often term an evolutionary mismatch between today's human biological bodies and the surroundings in which we find ourselves. However, I am saying that strong men today, those who live their lives with the very best values of masculinity, are getting fewer and fewer and are by far the minority in society. This past year, I've witnessed the very best of strong men, and I've also seen the very weakest of men and the behaviors that show themselves for all the world to see. Many of the woes of today, the causes of anxiety and why society isn't holding together as it used to, is a lack of commonly held values. Now, no one is saying that they are ideal. If they are, then they are not humble enough to see their own weaknesses. And I'm sure we can all think of men who are followed en masse by millions of young men whose integrity and virtue leave much to be desired, if not the very antithesis of what real strength is. Strength is not taking advantage over another. It is viewing life with a certain perspective and choosing situations to become opportunities for growth and improvement, rather than things that happen to them to which they have no control, nor the control of their response. Another claim that is sometimes made against Stoic values of strength and goodness is that they leave no room for compassion or empathy. Now, that claim couldn't be further from the truth. Compassion is very much a virtue of the strong man and definitely should not be equated with weakness of any kind. The only weakness in giving comes when you do not know what your limits are, because takers have no limits. No, to find true compassion in a situation in which your immediate reaction could be one of anger shows great strength. However, compassion is also the ability to empathize with the other person, but also know what action is needed for them to grow and strengthen as a result. Compassion and empathy with no direction towards strength is weakness, and there lies the dichotomy. People on the receiving end of that compassionate advice may feel that you are being harsh or even hurtful, especially if they are someone with a victim mindset. Now, compassion is strength, and so too is the caring that goes alongside the illumination of the road towards accepting your responsibilities, your potential, and that running away or avoidance is the opposite of compassion. It is weakness itself. What man who avoids his responsibilities and debts in whatever form can look himself in the mirror each morning with love and respect, knowing that your life and its legacy will be one of weakness and failure and a lack of authenticity? Now, that must be the worst feeling in the world. And hence it shouldn't surprise you that these men cannot look themselves in the mirror each morning with anything but disdain and shame. Alongside compassion, another word that many people don't expect to hear when talking about the virtues of strong men is the ability to ask for help. Asking for help is not a weakness. It is often the most courageous thing that any man can do, especially if that man hasn't yet experienced an ego death or walked alongside the road of spirituality for a while to know that his ego means nothing to the universe and if anything at all, it will hold him back from achieving the tasks and the purpose that he has set out to achieve. So when we're talking about strong men, we're not talking about men who lack compassion, empathy, nor are ego-driven or ruled by their ego, for they will ultimately fall and find that what they thought was strength was merely the stepping on somebody else to reach a destination. I've experienced several ego deaths myself through various journeys that I will perhaps talk about this year in future videos, but it was those ego deaths that were the hardest lessons for me to learn and to experience, the most humbling and also the most powerful. So don't let anybody say that there is subjectivity between weak and strong men when it comes down to the known virtues of each. We all know very well what is strong and what is weak. We all know very well what is good and what is bad, and we all very well know what is right and what is wrong. You can argue the nuance till the cows come home, but there is a set of fundamental virtues and behaviors that have been in place for millennia, from Mesopotamia, ancient Persia, Greece, Rome, all the way through the centuries to today. So men, if you feel yourselves overwhelmed or you do not know what to do in any situation, you can be assured that often the most courageous thing that you can do is to ask for help. Asking for help from the right people, of course. And I pray that you have those people around you, which leads me very nicely onto the influence of friendship and strong men. It was brought home to me many years ago that who I surround myself with will be who I become in 5 years' time. I've always been very careful, therefore, who it is I surround myself with. And if that means at times being alone, then so be it. It is far better to be alone in the company of your own goodness than to be around one weak man. In terms of Hobbes' quote, friends, we are the generation of weak men who have caused the hard times. I accept that the erosion of masculinity has taken place over the last 50, 60, 70 or more years. So we are merely part of the problem. And yes, of course, there are exceptions of good, very good, strong men today who push against the tide of ever increasing weakness, those soft lines of sculpture, those rounded forms where a man can look in the mirror and not even be sure if he's looking at a masculine or a feminine form. Now, bodybuilding, you would think, would be one area of society where the Apollonian ideal is still alive and well, but not so. Not if alongside that muscular masculine physique goes with it a weak character, weak morality, weak ethics, a lack of courage, a lack of honesty, and a lack of honor and integrity. All Apollonian attributes that are becoming less and less commonplace in today's Western world. I am not a political man by any nature, for various reasons I won't go into here, except to say that as a historian, it's difficult to find another time in history when nations were so polarized as they are today, with so few people willing to put their head above the parapet. Nations so broken, yet without a sign of rebellious in place. Again, it would be interesting to investigate this historically, but not for now. For me, though, it was and it is another perfect example of weak men again. I was hearing men who claim to be ultra-masculine, but whose behaviours appear to display estrogen levels that rival a woman's on any day of the week, desperately seeking the hero who would save them from the bad others, or the evil that exists on the other side of whatever division they have made in the world. When you as a man are waiting for a hero to save you, or that you are relying on someone else to solve all the problems that you see in your society, then I see a weak man in front of me. Strong men are the heroes. You need to wake up and realize that no one is going to save your day or take on the responsibilities that are yours and yours alone. What people often fail to realize is that heroes, they don't wear capes, nor do they all get acknowledged for the work that they do. But whilst it is true we cannot have much influence on an area greater than that of our own lives, our own world, however, I've also seen how making changes for good in your own world can have a ripple effect and produce changes far greater afield than you would initially believe otherwise. Seriously, I would say that our biggest weakness as men right now in 2025 is the reluctance, the avoidance and fear of taking responsibility for our own lives. And I mean every aspect of our own lives: our health, our wealth, our happiness and our reason for existing. No, we cannot solve the society's problems by ourselves, but by our not taking on the responsibility of our own lives, it makes it so easy for us to end up living someone else's agenda. As William Blake wrote, make your own rules or be a slave to another man's. I've experienced so many men saying to me how they live by codes of conduct, traditional masculine bonds of trust and honesty, whilst in reality they act out the Taleb quote: weak men act to satisfy their own needs, strong men their duties. How many of us are guilty of satisfying our own needs instead of our duties, those responsibilities which are literally set out in place for us to shoulder? As a philosopher and a historian, I see an entire generation of men addicted to dopamine hits instead of seeking happiness, which is found in the process, not in the result, the destination, constantly looking for ways to get the next dopamine hit, whether it's from social media, pornography, alcohol, drugs, food, you name it, and if it triggers an instant dopamine hit, then it's normally both addictive and not good for you long term. If that is you, you're a weak man. If you are a weak man and you want to become a strong man, then you must do whatever is necessary to wipe the slate clean and begin again to those values of stoicism. How do you wipe the slate clean? Well, why not start having a 30-day dopamine fast? That would be a good start. Look, our bodies will release dopamine whether we do anything pleasurable. So it's not like you're not going to be getting any dopamine. What I mean is that behavior that you know is not good for you, that's weak, that still hits your dopamine receptors easily, and is a behavior that you return to time and time again whenever you have a free 30 minutes. Well, stop that for 30 days. And the thing is, you know this. It's no point in being disciplined in bodybuilding if the rest of your life is undisciplined, weak, and heading you towards addictive behaviors that will only result in you becoming a weak man with big muscles. No, if you're a bodybuilder, then why not be a strong man with big muscles? There are plenty of examples to choose from. In fact, isn't it funny how many of our top ever athletes and bodybuilders are also our top role models. Not always, I accept that, but a high percentage, I would say. The thing that is still outstanding, that it's your responsibility to deal with. Yes, that's your weakness preventing you from doing that. That action that upon waking you inspired you, but by late afternoon you're feeling tired, you put off to another day. Yes, that too is weakness. That debt you owe, whether it be financial or of an action of help returned. Yes, you've got it. That's just you being too weak to confront dealing with it. You're a weak man. I make no apologies for the bluntness of this message. If there is something I wish to be a part of, it's the change in 2025 for the picking back up of our responsibilities. To do, instead of talking about it, to be the ideal of that muscular Apollonian statue, and to also have the inner strength of Apollo, the courage, integrity, honesty, honor, and virtue. What if, just what if, we decided that we had come to the end of the current cycle of hard times caused by weak men? What if we decided that as men and women, we men need your help and encouragement and accountability in doing this, to take back control of how we respond to life, to say something, and in saying that it meant those words were chiseled in stone. The very first step towards a strong man, a better man, is develop the strength and honesty to be able to accuse yourself honestly with what the flaws are in your character, and to identify which areas in life you particularly need to grow. Trust me, you'll know them, especially when you're staring yourself in the face. These are things you can teach yourself. They don't come genetically neatly packaged in your DNA that you inherited from your mother and father, although your personality type, which may affect your propensity to certain behaviors, is inherited. That is never an excuse for not developing these behaviors. Neither is not having a father or a role model there as a child, and as an adolescent, an excuse for your behavior as an adult. You're a grown-ass man now. You can make your own decisions now on how you behave. Strong men and good men do not have a victim mentality. They have a can-do mentality. Indeed, adversity in life brings with it the potential and opportunity for growth to become stronger and better. The weak man sees adversity and runs from it, avoids it, and heaven help him if he has a wife or a partner who enables him to do so. The power of perspective is something that I will investigate in future videos, but for now, let me just say that the exact same adversity or event in life is always just a perspective away from being either an opportunity to grow, change for the better, and to learn, or to be the thing that damages you, that is the victim mentality. And I advise you strongly against doing that. It will lead you on a downward spiral that ends in a personal hell. Compassion is another of a strong and a good man's behaviors. And once again, perspective is the key factor here. For what to a man with a victim mentality may appear cruel and harsh, may very well be pure compassion in a different perspective. Compassion is certainly not a weakness, just as the ability to ask for help is not a weakness. It's a great strength. Consider this. Let us imagine that someone has treated you poorly, dishonestly, dishonorably, in effect, just like a weak man would. Your response to that person never needs to come from a place of anger, resentment, or any negativity at all. It can come in the form of compassion and still produce an outcome that produces a lesson that the transgressor will very personally feel and hopefully learn from. You've done some work for somebody and you've done a great job, and now you're waiting for payment for a period which has now become unreasonable and has affected your cash flow, your living, and created difficulties for your business and your family. Now, you can get angry, upset, and wish negativity towards that person, or you can act with compassion and use the opportunity to teach them about responsibility and stepping up to their own inaction and failure to honor their debt. An important point to mention here is one from literature, Dante's Inferno, and the painting of it. It has betrayal as the very closest level next to hell and the devil itself. There is nothing more destructive, hurtful, and evil than the betrayal of someone who you thought was a friend or that you could rely upon. The trauma that can cause is exactly why Dante put it right next door to hell. Well, how do you do so? I'll explain that in a future video. Strength is found in many forms, but it is never found in the avoidance of an issue or a challenge or responsibility that is yours. How would you feel each morning if that transgressor was you? How would you feel looking at yourself, knowing that your behavior was against everything that you knew to be right? Everything that you knew was you had been dishonest, you'd been dishonorable, fearful, a coward to responsibility, lacking in both virtue and integrity. Is that the legacy that you want to leave your life? Do you want to be remembered as a man of weakness and of failure? Do you want your children to view you as a weak man? Do you want your legacy for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren to be that you ran away from your responsibilities and avoided the right, the good, the strong action, only instead to avoid it and to run away from it? What instead if you woke up this morning or tomorrow morning and decided that every day you would begin the day with a pledge? You could even adopt the affirmation that I decided to begin to live my life by after my accident 15 years ago. Each morning I say to myself, today I will be more honest than yesterday. Today I will be more honorable than yesterday. Today I will be more courageous than I was yesterday. I will be more virtuous than yesterday, and I will have more integrity than I had yesterday. Now it sounds like just words, but don't make them just words. Be a man and live by them. You can live your life loving the warrior but hating the war. And that, I think, is a nice analogy for the mindset of good and strong men. Now, I've lived by those words for 15 years now, and my life is unrecognizable to the one that I was living 15 years ago. So if you only did this on a purely selfish basis to make your life more successful, more admirable, more noble, and how about happier? I think that's a good outcome. But I know that even if doing this from a selfish perspective, you cannot be changed by the transformation that you'll see in your life. Once again, don't think for a moment that I'm sitting here with an attitude or any sense of I've got all the answers, or even that I behave myself with goodness and strength all the time. I'm having to remind myself daily of these virtues, and I'm having to dig deep within for the courage and the fortitude every day to continue to live as a strong man. Someone who is respected, trusted, and also loved. For all three should be the outcome when you align yourself to these values. I don't care if you want to be a great bodybuilder or a great writer or a great road sweeper. You'll create a character that people will admire, want to be near, and want to be a part of. As Camille Paglia reminds us, the cyclical nature of history appears to be endless, and as essential a part of nature as masculine and feminine itself. But as the Stoics and great philosophers have always told us, we have the choice of our reactions to all things. Never allow external events to dictate your emotional state. Be your own master. If you are unhappy, going nowhere, feeling frustrated, lonely, empty, then what have you got to lose? Death? He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a man who is alive. My wish for you for this year then is that you make a choice. What sort of man will you become in this year? And as for the ladies watching, now please don't think I'm being misogynistic with my direction towards men, but the reason is simply that I believe the problem within our society and its collapse lies mostly at the feet of men right now. Women are the equal, if not the more powerful part of nature. They are the force of creation. Nothing in nature can be created without the feminine. Well, there may be words for women in another video regarding reclaiming back your femininity rather than living predominantly through your masculine energies. Because yes, you do this very well, often much better than men right now. And perhaps the plethora of weak men has created the need for women to step up into that role. But this universe and this world is a place where both energies should be present in their perfect ratio. And sadly, men have been both erased through 2 world wars and then emasculated through society and weak characters, following both ideological narratives and our own laziness, succumbing to the lures of dopamine rushes, blaming circumstances in life instead of taking accountability and seeking a road to happiness. Now, if there's one thing I think, and it's very simplistic, but dopamine equals pleasure. Serotonin equals happiness. Yes, it's an oversimplistic statement, but there is some truth in it if you want to delve into it. Dopamine is easily obtained through what we may well call addictions. You know, it could be anything: sugar, cocaine, orgasm, phone screens, and it leaves you weak. The other, the actions to increase in serotonin levels, now those build character, and they can only be had by taking on hard tasks, responsibility, and they build strength. I'll do a series of videos explaining this entire subject in detail. And each video will describe a particular virtue that goes along with being and becoming a strong man. And also, I'll be giving examples where I have personally witnessed very weak men. And sadly, along with weak also comes verbs like lazy, soft, cowardly, scared, and can result from many reasons: a lack of a role model, trauma that has been allowed to consume an identity. But whatever the reason, if you believe that life is important, that your life is important, then nothing on this earth will prevent you from overcoming any worldly event that has happened to you. Once again, look to the Stoics for a guiding principle in life. It is not what happens to us in life that matters, but our reactions to those things in life. For our reactions, we always have a choice over. And again, please don't think for a moment I'm saying this from a position of any superiority and that I've got my act completely in order. This is a topic I've spent the last 15 years of my life, my personal, my academic life, researching, testing, exploring, finding myself wanting in many areas and then making a decision to change. It comprises a multiplicity of behaviors and mindsets that are learned, although it certainly appears to come more naturally and instinctively to some. All men have the capacity to become strong men. However, there needs to be a desire to become one. In simple terms, it's a choice to learn or not to learn. What will you choose this year? Weakness or strength? Once you've made your choice, then as you pick up momentum with your new character and behaviors, you'll find that all along, just being authentic to yourself was always the answer. Being authentic may be the hardest, yet the most important thing that we can ever do for ourselves. But you must also be aware that there are no virtues without trade-offs. Those dopamine hits from whatever source you were addicted to must go. Those hits of instant gratification you used to seek in the easiest ways must give way to a focus on a journey in which happiness is something that you will meet along the way, and it's not your destination or your outcome or a goal because it's never going to end. Remember, hedonistic pleasure gives the weakest part of you everything that it wants. But you also have to be aware that the right amount of in-the-moment pleasure is not zero. Choosing a long-term worthy goal needn't mean not enjoying life as you go. I mean, who wants to be a miserable, joyless man, just thinking always far ahead in the future? It's simply a case that it must be you that is in control of when you have those hits of dopamine, and when you decide that you've had enough and any more could become problematic. So yes, enjoy moments, but just be aware that becoming addicted to anything will always end up in weakness. And who wants to be known for being a hedonistic slave? Or in other words, a weak man living irresponsibly and inauthentically. Live as though you are creating your legacy now. You're going to leave stuff, whatever you do. So why not make sure that the sum total of your life is an admirable one? We're all going to die. And irrespective of your spiritual beliefs, I think it's pretty damn important to ensure that what you're going to leave is something worthy of being remembered, something remembered as good and noble and positive, and that you will be remembered throughout history for what you would want to be known for. And your life is never complete with the achievement of one remarkable or big triumph or mountain peak. That won't always be the legacy that you'll be remembered by. Remember, once you've reached the pinnacle of one mountaintop, lo and behold, a completely new landscape appears with new mountains to climb and new challenges to meet. And in terms of real life, that may mean whatever you found success in before, that mountaintop may be completely different to this new one that has now been made visible to you. It's something that you often see with great sports stars. They achieve the peak of their sport, They win gold medals or world championships, and then on retirement they become lost. For instead of admiring the new landscape now in view, they try to cling on to what they already are an expert in. It's just that life has moved on, and new contenders will be winning those same titles. No, your new peak may be something in an area totally different to what you have known and spent your life doing for 20, 30 or 40 years. And that's not an easy transition to make. It's the same for anyone retiring from their old profession, especially if they're still relatively young, like from the forces. It's something that Damien Porter and I recently discussed in a podcast. And it's well worth a listen, that podcast. It's not out just yet, but Damien's from the world of special forces warriors. And he has witnessed for himself the difficulties of old friends and associates to be able to reinvent themselves. I believe as a generation of men, we've reset our pain thresholds too low to be accurate. Do you think our great-grandfathers would have felt worry and anxiety of some of the things that we worry about today? Training in Temple Gym was all about pain, hard work, strength in mind as well as body. Today's gyms are not the same. Do they still even exist? For sure, but they're the exception. They're not the norm these days. To watch people working out today from a perspective of Temple Gym would honestly be laughable. But again, it's not just a problem that we have created. Society has helped create these environments where the sound of weights clanging together and the screams of hard work are seen as off-putting and socially unacceptable. Again, weak men. Now, why do you think Dorian is so revered in the industry to this day? It's for his mental strength and his no BS attitude that people love him. And trust me, he would not tolerate any weakness in his training sessions. If there was, you were out. Simple. That leads me to a critical part of trying to find solutions to these problems. And yes, I will analyze this issue in depth in the weeks to come, with what I believe are workable solutions to cleanse you from the men that society tells you that they want you to be, and the men that the world needs you to be. For I absolutely believe in the saying, evil arises when good men say, and I would add, do nothing. Also choose your friends carefully this year. Are you going to continue with those people who allow you to get away with less than your best? Allow you to live immorally, unethically, weakly? Or are you going to choose good, strong men only to be around you? And yes, they will take time to find. But once around you, they will encourage you. They will hold you to account, and they will soon become your family. Or as I like to call them, my tribe. A final quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that I think sums up this period of time perfectly. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Most men today are weak. We can all do better. In doing so, you will stop feeling that you are relying on the world's actions to bring you happiness. You will stop feeling lonely. You will begin to feel the strength that comes in holding yourself to the highest of values. The feeling that you stand stronger than other men gives you an advantage in life. You choose and you chose how to react, what you do and what you do not do. Nothing, no fear, no responsibility, no smartphone, no going along with the crowd anymore. You choose your own path. Yes, there are less people walking upon it with you, but you will find kindred spirits. And who knows, you may influence others to walk that same path with you and take up the responsibilities of life that instead of frightens them, now empowers them. And while some men may be born with personalities that lend themselves more towards responsibility than others, being strong's always a choice. And it's always a set of virtues and behaviors that we can all begin to install within our lives if you do not do so already. Now, how quickly would this world change if the majority of men took up their own responsibilities this year, accepted that what happens in life isn't always controllable, but that our reaction to every event is within our control? What if the majority of men began to tell nothing but the truth? No lies. Make honor and integrity essential elements of their character. What if most men realize that courage isn't something that you're either born into or not into you, but that you can choose to be courageous every single day? Well, what would happen then? Let us be the new generation of strong men that leads us out of hard times into new good times. Come on, man. Let us all do better and be better. Thanks very much for listening. The series will be continued. Thank you.